My granddaughter handed the gift back to me and said, "Grandpa, why does the bunny's eye look like a black dot?" I leaned in. My stomach dropped. I didn't say a word. I walked to my study, locked the door, and called my attorney. 4 days later, my daughter-in-law was sitting across from a detective, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start with the morning of Mia's 7th birthday. It was a Saturday in October, the kind that smells like wood smoke and dry leaves, when the air in Asheville gets sharp enough to remind you that summer never lasts. My wife Ruth and I had decorated the back porch the night before. Paper lanterns, a banner Mia had helped us pick out online, a folding table covered with the orange tablecloth she had requested specifically. Ruth had made her lemon cake from scratch, the same recipe she'd been using since our son was a boy. The house smelled like butter and sugar, and something I can only call home. Mia is the kind of child who notices everything. At 7, she reads chapter books, asks questions that make adults pause, and remembers conversations word for word. She gets that from Ruth. I take credit for the stubbornness. Our son Raymond had dropped Mia off Friday evening. He couldn't make the birthday. Work, he said. His wife Diane had an event in Charlotte she couldn't reschedule. I'd stopped asking Raymond to explain his absences a long time ago. You reach a point where you understand that whatever is holding your child away from you is bigger than a phone call can fix. Mia didn't seem bothered. She'd already told us 3 weeks earlier that she wanted her real birthday party at Grandma and Grandpa's house. Not at home. Here. With us. By noon, the back porch was full. Ruth's sister had driven up from Hendersonville. 2 of Mia's school friends came with their mothers. My neighbor Frank brought his grandsons, and they chased each other around the yard with foam swords until Ruth made them put the swords down before someone lost an eye. I was grilling when the package arrived. A delivery driver knocked at the front door around 1:30. Long, flat box, padded with tissue paper inside, card attached in handwriting I recognized as Diane's mother, Claudette's. To Mia, with love from Grandma Claudette and Grandpa Vic. Diane appeared at my shoulder. She'd shown up an hour earlier than Raymond, alone, carrying a bottle of wine I hadn't asked for, and wearing a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Mom and Dad couldn't make it, she said, but they wanted Mia to have something special. Mia was already tearing the tissue paper. Inside was a stuffed rabbit. Large, plush, cream-colored, with a pink bow around its neck and glass eyes that caught the afternoon light. It was beautiful. Mia hugged it immediately and spun around with it. Then she stopped. "Grandpa." She held it out toward me, head tilted. "Why does the bunny's eye look like a black dot?" "It's different from the other one." I took the rabbit, looked where she was pointing. The left eye had a faint circular discoloration, a dark ring around the pupil that the right eye didn't have. I adjusted my angle. The light shifted. I knew exactly what I was looking at. A lens. Tiny, embedded behind the glass, barely detectable unless you knew to look. My chest went still the way it does before something breaks. "Let Grandpa hold on to this for a minute, sweetheart," I said. "Go get your cake started. Grandma's been waiting to light the candles." Mia ran inside. I stood in the yard holding the rabbit. Diane was watching me from the porch steps. "Everything okay, Walter?" "Fine," I said. "Just checking the stitching. These plush toys sometimes have loose seams." She smiled. "Of course." I carried the rabbit through the kitchen, down the hall, into my study. I locked the door. I set the rabbit on my desk under the lamp and took out the reading glasses I keep in the top drawer. There was no question. A miniature camera lens, professional grade, embedded in the left eye. I turned the rabbit over and found the seam at the base, slightly uneven, restitched. I didn't open it. I photographed everything first. The lens, the seam, the manufacturer tag, the box the rabbit had come in, Claudette's card. Then I sat in my chair and stared at the ceiling. This wasn't the first time I'd felt watched in my own home. For 3 weeks I'd had the sensation that something was off. A prickling at the back of my neck when I walked into certain rooms. I'd assumed it was age, or the low-grade anxiety that had been my companion since Ruth's health scare last spring. I told myself I was being foolish. I hadn't been foolish. I thought about the last month. The questions Diane had been asking in her careful, concerned way. Raymond mentioned you forgot a doctor's appointment last month. Is that right? She'd asked it at Sunday dinner, her voice soft, her eyes on Raymond, who nodded without meeting mine. Ruth mentioned you had some trouble with the bills this summer. I hadn't had trouble with the bills. I'd switched bank accounts, and the automatic payment had lagged by a week. I'd told Ruth. Ruth hadn't told Diane, which meant Diane had been listening. I thought about the house. Ruth and I bought it in 1991, craftsman style, half an acre, corner lot in West Asheville, 2 blocks from the school where I taught English for 28 years. The neighborhood had changed. The value had not gone down. A real estate agent had knocked on our door 18 months ago, unprompted, and told us the property was worth somewhere between $420, depending on the market. I'd thanked him and closed the door. Ruth had said, "Who sent him?" I hadn't known then. I had a guess now. I thought about Ruth's name on the deed. Mine too, both of ours, jointly. I thought about what happens to property when one partner is declared incompetent and institutionalized. I thought about guardianship law in North Carolina. Then I picked up my phone and called my attorney. Her name is Margaret Osei. She'd handled our estate planning 3 years ago. Sharp, efficient, and exactly the kind of person you want on your side when something is being built against you in the dark. I reached her voicemail. I left a message that was short and specific. I have documentation of potential surveillance equipment placed in my home without consent. I believe there may be legal proceedings being prepared against me. I need to meet as soon as possible. She called back in 11 minutes. She told me to bring everything I had and to not confront anyone yet. I went back out to the birthday party. I smiled. I watched Mia blow out her candles. I watched Diane watch me. That practiced warmth she wore like a coat she'd learned to button perfectly. I watched Raymond arrive 40 minutes later, distracted, barely present, unable to hold my gaze for more than a second. I said nothing. I waited. Margaret's office was on the 3rd floor of a building on Marymount Avenue. She met me Sunday morning, coffee already made, door already open. I laid everything on the conference table. The photographs. A written timeline I put together the night before after Ruth fell asleep. The recording I'd made on my phone 6 days earlier. The one I hadn't yet told anyone about. 3 weeks before the birthday party, I'd come home early from the hardware store. Ruth was at her book club. The house should have been empty. I'd heard Diane's voice coming from the living room and stopped in the hallway. The front door had been unlocked, which meant Diane had used the key Raymond had given her 2 years ago for emergencies. She hadn't known I was there. She was on the phone. He's sharper than I expected. But that's fine, she said. We have time. The filing is almost ready. Once the evaluation is scheduled, it moves fast. Ruth won't fight it. She never fights anything. I'd stood in the hallway for 12 seconds without moving. Then I'd backed out the front door quietly, walked around to the garage, and come in through the side entrance, making enough noise that she'd heard me. When I walked into the living room, she was sitting on the couch with her phone in her lap. "Oh, Walter, I didn't hear you come in. I was just in the neighborhood and wanted to drop off those photographs from Mia's school play. Raymond forgot to bring them." There were no photographs. She left 5 minutes later. I'd stood in the living room after she left and made a decision. I didn't say anything to Ruth. I started recording. Margaret listened to the audio without expression. When it finished, she set down her pen. "When did you first notice the questions about your memory?" 4, maybe 5 months ago. "Has anyone suggested you might benefit from an evaluation, a cognitive assessment?" Diane brought it up once at dinner. She framed it as being proactive. Said it was something a lot of people do at our age. Did Raymond support that suggestion? He said it wasn't a bad idea. He wouldn't look at me when he said it. Margaret opened her laptop. "I checked court records this morning after your message." She turned the screen toward me. My name was at the top of a guardianship petition. Filed 11 days ago. Petitioner, Diane. Supporting affidavit from a doctor, Whitfield, a geriatric specialist I'd never seen, never spoken to, never consented to be assessed by. The affidavit described me as exhibiting moderate cognitive decline consistent with early-stage dementia, including difficulty managing finances, confusion regarding appointments, and increasing dependence on spouse for daily functions. None of it was true. "The attorney of record," Margaret said, clicking to another document. is a man named Victor Alcott. Do you know him? I didn't. She showed me his firm's website. Estate litigation, elder law, guardianship proceedings. Then she showed me something else, a photograph from a regional bar association newsletter. Victor Alcott, mid-40s, dark suit, standing at a charity gala. Standing next to him, her hand on his arm and her face turned toward the camera, was Diane. That photograph is 18 months old, Margaret said. I found two others from similar events. They appear to know each other quite well. I looked at the photograph for a long time. Tell me about the house, Margaret said. Joint ownership, Ruth and me. Value, we've been told $420. Retirement savings, between us, somewhere around $300,000. IRAs, a small pension from the school district. Some investments. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Mr. Mestrance, Hartley, what you're describing is a coordinated effort. The surveillance equipment, the affidavit from a doctor you've never seen, the planted narrative about your cognitive decline. This isn't a concerned family member. This is financial exploitation through guardianship fraud. It's more common than most people realize, and it is very difficult to undo once a guardianship order is in place. What happens once it's in place? She was careful with her answer. The guardian gains legal control over decisions about your housing, your finances, your medical care. In cases involving significant assets, the exploitation can happen quickly. Sale of property, liquidation of accounts. The incompetent party has limited ability to challenge anything, legally speaking, because their legal standing has been removed. She said the next part slowly. People in those situations sometimes do not live long, particularly when the guardians have financial reasons to minimize care costs. We sat with that for a moment. The hearing is in 13 days, she said. That's fast, but not fast enough to be comfortable. They will almost certainly escalate before then. They need to manufacture evidence of your instability. Be visible. Document everything. Don't be alone with Diane or anyone connected to her. I drove home. Ruth was making soup. I sat at the kitchen table and told her everything. Ruth is 67 years old. She taught middle school science for 31 years. She is not a woman who panics. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for about 10 seconds. Then she said, I knew something was wrong. I didn't know what. I asked her what she'd noticed. Diane started asking me things about you 6 months ago. Small things. Had I noticed you being more forgetful? Was I worried about you managing the finances alone? She framed it as concern. I told her you were fine. She kept asking. Ruth looked at me steadily. She was building a record. She was using my answers. Did you ever say anything that could be used? I said you'd been tired since your knee surgery. That's it. We sat together in the kitchen while the soup simmered. 3 days later, Diane escalated exactly as Margaret had predicted. She called on a Wednesday morning. Her voice was warm and urgent. Mia had been asking to spend more time with us, she said. Why didn't we take her for the afternoon? She'd drop her off at noon. She'd drop her off at 5. I said, of course. Ruth and I had Mia every weekend. This wasn't unusual. But the address Diane texted at 11:45 was not our address. It was a shopping center on the east side of Asheville, one I'd driven past 100 times, that I knew had been largely vacant for 2 years, a parking lot, and a few closed storefronts. I recognized the play immediately. I texted back, got it. See you there. Then I called Margaret. They're going to create an incident, she said. Send you to the wrong place, claim confusion, use it as evidence. Mia is already in the car, I said. Diane left early. I saw them pull out when I was checking the mail. Do you have something on Mia? A way to track her? 2 weeks earlier, Ruth had given Mia a children's smartwatch for her birthday. GPS enabled. Two-way calling. Mia wore it every day. I'd registered the account. I pulled up the app on my tablet. Mia's location was moving northeast. Not toward the shopping center. Toward Swannanoa, where Claudette and Vic lived. I called 911. I told the dispatcher my 7-year-old granddaughter had been taken by her mother to a location different from what I'd been told. I told them there was an active guardianship case. I gave them Margaret's name and number. The dispatcher's voice shifted when I said the word Guardianship. Officers were being sent to the Swannanoa address. I was already in my truck. Ruth came with me. She didn't ask. She just put on her shoes. We arrived at Claudette's house at the same time as two patrol officers. The house had an American flag by the door and flower boxes on the windows. The kind of house that looks like it has nothing to hide. Diane answered the door. She saw the officers and her face went through three expressions in half a second. Surprise, calculation, recovery. "There's been a misunderstanding," she said pleasantly. "Walter must have gotten the address confused." Mia appeared in the hallway behind her. When Mia saw Ruth and me, she pushed past Diane and ran to us, and she was crying before she reached us. "I pressed the button," she said into my shoulder. "I pressed the button like Grandma showed me." "You did exactly right," Ruth said. "Exactly right." One of the officers asked to speak with Mia alone. He took her to the porch while his partner stayed with the adults. When he came back, his expression was controlled in the way that means something has shifted. Mia had told him that she'd been brought to her other grandmother's house without being told where they were going, that during the drive and after they arrived, the adults had been asking her questions about us, whether Grandpa forgot things, whether we fed her properly, whether she ever felt scared at our house. She told the officer she didn't like the questions and that she wanted to go home. The officer took down names and noted the discrepancy in addresses. No arrests, not yet. But paper had been added to the file. I took Mia home. She fell asleep in the truck before we reached the highway. That night, after Ruth had tucked her in, I sat in my study and opened the smartwatch app again. The device had a feature I hadn't thought to check until that moment. Ambient audio capture, stored in the cloud, timestamp. The watch had been recording since noon. I put on headphones. The first 30 minutes were background noise. Car sounds. Music from a radio. Then Claudette's voice, clear as a phone call in a quiet room. "Mia, sweetheart, we're going to play a little game, okay? A practice game." Mia's voice small. "What kind of game?" "Diane, it's a memory game. About things you've seen at Grandma Ruth and Grandpa Walter's house. We're going to practice saying some things, and then if a nice lady ever asks you those things, you'll know what to say." "Mia, what nice lady?" "Claudette, a helper. Someone who checks on kids to make sure their grandparents are taking good care of them." "Diane, Mia, has Grandpa Walter ever forgotten to make you lunch?" "Mia, no." "Diane, but sometimes he gets confused, right? About what day it is?" "Mia, I don't think so." Claudette, voice softening. "Sweetheart, we're just trying to help Grandpa. He's getting older. Sometimes older people need special help, and the only way they can get that help is if the people who love them speak up. Do you love Grandpa Walter?" "Mia, yes." Claudette, "Then you can help him. Say this, Grandpa forgets things sometimes." Silence. "Mia, but he doesn't." Diane, voice cooling Mia. "Say it." Long pause. Mia, barely audible. "Grandpa forgets things sometimes." Claudette, "Good girl. And what do you say if someone asks where Grandpa should live?" Mia, crying now. "I don't want to say that." Diane, "Mia, we talked about this. If you don't help us, Grandpa might get very sick and there won't be anyone to take care of him. Is that what you want?" Mia, "No." Diane, "Then say it." I stopped the recording. My hands were steady. I don't know how. I restarted it after a minute, forced myself to listen to the rest. Vic came in near the end, lower voice, speaking to Diane and Claudette while Mia was in the other room. "She's wearing that watch again, we should." "Diane, it's a toy. It's GPS only. Walter's 68, Vic. He's not going to figure out the audio." I sat in the dark for a long time. Then the study door opened. Raymond stood in the doorway. He was pale. He'd let himself in with his key. He hadn't called first. He stood there looking at me like a man who has been carrying something too heavy for too long. "I need to talk to you," he said. "Sit down," I said. He sat. He put his hands on his knees and looked at the floor. He was quiet for almost a full minute. Then he said, "I found messages on her phone 8 months ago, between her and Alcott, about the house, about your accounts, about what a guardianship order would mean for the estate." He looked up. "I confronted her. She said if I went to you or Ruth or anyone, she would take Mia. She has a sister in Portland. She said she would take her there and I would spend years in court trying to get her back. His voice cracked on the last word. I believed her. I was a coward. I didn't know about Sophie, about Mia, about what they were doing to. He stopped. There's a recording, I said. I handed him the headphones. I watched my son's face while he listened. I watched the color go out of it. I watched him press the headphones harder against his ears, as if he needed to be sure he was hearing correctly. When the recording ended, he sat very still for almost 30 seconds. Then he took off the headphones and set them on the desk. Tell me what you need, he said. I need everything you have. Every message. Every email. Every receipt. He reached into his jacket. He pulled out his phone in a folded envelope. I've been keeping copies, he said quietly. I didn't know what else to do with them. I didn't have the spine to use them. He set the envelope on the desk. I do now. Margaret's conference room on Thursday morning looked like the inside of a very calm hurricane. She'd arranged everything on the table the night before. Ruth sat next to me. Raymond sat across from us, red-eyed, steady. Margaret stood at the head of the table and went through the evidence piece by piece. The rabbit. Forensics from a private tech specialist had confirmed an active wireless camera transmitting to an IP address registered to Alcott and Associates. She'd already filed the report. The audio from Mia's watch, time-stamped, geolocated to Claudette's home address. My recording from 3 weeks prior. Diane's phone call, her voice, her words. The filing is almost ready. Raymond's materials. 8 months of text messages between Diane and Alcott, references to the estate, the property value, a projected timeline. One message read, once the order is in, give it 90 days. Another, make sure the wife doesn't interfere. She's not the target. The guardianship petition. The fabricated affidavit, the name of a doctor who had never met me, whose signature appeared on a document describing my condition in clinical detail. Margaret had also pulled public records on Victor Alcott. In the previous 3 years, he had filed 4 guardianship petitions in Buncombe County. 3 of those families had seen their primary assets liquidated within 4 months of the order being granted. In 2 cases, the elderly subject had died within a year of placement. Adult Protective Services had opened inquiries in both cases. Both inquiries had been closed without action. The room was quiet after she finished. He's done this before, Ruth said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Margaret said, and the families didn't stop him. The families who might have stopped him were often the ones who stood to benefit. This situation is different. You have documentation. You have the son cooperating. You have a child who told a police officer, in her own words, that she was being coached. She looked at us steadily. We have them. She told us what the next 7 days would look like. Depositions, forensic reports, character witnesses. A colleague of mine from my teaching years, Thomas Brody, had already agreed to testify. We'd taught together for 19 years. He would tell the court that he'd played chess with me every Thursday for the past 4 years. That I'd beaten him 60% of the time, and that in his professional opinion as a retired educator, my cognitive function was sharper than most people half my age. They will claim this is all a misunderstanding, Margaret said. A loving family, genuine concern. They will paint the surveillance equipment as coincidence or mistake. The coaching session is well-meaning preparation. We prove premeditation. We prove conspiracy. We prove the use of a child. She looked at Raymond. Your testimony will be the hardest and the most important. He nodded. I know. The hearing was held on a Thursday morning in Buncombe County Civil Court. Judge Ellison presided, 64, methodical, 22 years on the bench. He had the look of someone who stopped being surprised by human behavior but has not stopped being displeased by it. Alcott sat at the petitioner's table beside Diane, who was composed in a way that looked rehearsed. Claudette and Vic sat in the gallery. Mia was in a separate room with a court-appointed child advocate. Alcott's opening was polished. Concerned family, cognitive decline, best interests. He used the words loving and safety 11 times. I counted. Diane took the stand. She described a grandfather who forgot appointments, confused dates, left appliances running, became agitated when questioned. She described a wife who covered for him out of loyalty. She was calm. She was believable. She had practiced this. Then Margaret stood up. She introduced the rabbit, the technical expert, a young woman named Dr. Aisha Kamalath. explained in precise and unhurried terms that the camera embedded in the stuffed animal had been transmitting continuously to an IP address registered to Alcott's firm for the 6 days it had been in my home. She showed the court a map of transmission data. She was in my study, my kitchen, my bedroom. Alcott objected. The judge sustained it, then asked Dr. Kumalaf to continue. Margaret introduced the audio from Mia's watch. Mia's voice filled the courtroom. I don't want to say that. Diane's voice cooling Mia. Say it. Mia, crying. Grandpa forgets things sometimes. And then the worst part, Claudette's voice gentle and deliberate. If you don't help us, Grandpa might get very sick and there won't be anyone to take care of him. The gallery went still. Judge Ellison's pen stopped moving. Diane gripped the edge of the table. Her face didn't change, but her knuckles went white. When the recording ended, the silence lasted long enough to become its own kind of verdict. Margaret called Raymond to the stand. He walked to the witness box like a man settling a debt he should have paid 8 months earlier. He was sworn in. He looked at the judge, not at Diane. Mr. Hartley, Margaret said, tell the court what you know. He told them everything. The messages, the timeline, the plan he'd understood only partially and had been too afraid to act on. He presented his phone, the screenshots he'd been keeping since the night he'd first read those messages and understood what his wife was. He presented the hotel receipts, 6 months of them. Same credit card, Alcott's name appearing in the digital records. His voice was steady throughout. It broke exactly once when he said his daughter's name. Alcott rose 3 times to object. The judge sustained none of them. Thomas Brody testified to my competence with the precision of a man who has graded papers for 3 decades. He described our chess games, my memory, my engagement, my humor. He said he would trust me with anything he owned. Margaret introduced Alcott's case history. 4 petitions, 3 liquidated estates, 2 deaths. The judge read the documentation for a long time without speaking. Then Diane was recalled to the stand. Margaret asked her one question. Mrs. Brew, Hartley, did you arrange for the stuffed rabbit to be sent to Mia's birthday party knowing it contained a wireless camera? Diane said she hadn't known. Margaret asked her when she'd last spoken with Victor Alcott by phone. Diane said she couldn't recall. Margaret placed a phone record on the table. 47 calls in 60 days. The most recent, 2 days before the birthday party. Diane said nothing. Judge Ellison removed his glasses. He ruled from the bench. The guardianship petition was denied in full. My competence was affirmed. The matter was referred to the district attorney for investigation into elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, illegal surveillance, and child endangerment. The North Carolina State Bar was notified of the referral involving Alcott. A restraining order was issued against Diane, Claudette, and Vic. No contact with me, with Ruth, or with Mia. Emergency primary custody of Mia was transferred to me and Ruth pending family court review. Raymond's parental rights were protected contingent on his continued cooperation with the investigation. The judge's last words before he stood were simple. The exploitation of the elderly and the manipulation of children are not acts of love. This court will treat them accordingly. I didn't look at Diane when we left. I didn't need to. 3 months later, Victor Alcott surrendered his law license pending criminal charges. Diane moved back to her parents' house in Swannanoa, which is now also under investigation. The district attorney's office opened a review of the 2 elder deaths from Alcott's prior cases. Raymond filed for divorce. He is in the guest room until he finds a place, and some evenings we sit on the porch and talk. Really talk, in a way we hadn't in years. Mia is in therapy. Her therapist says she is resilient. I already knew that. She comes home from school and does her homework at the kitchen table while Ruth makes dinner, and sometimes she looks up and says, "Grandpa, did you know?" and then tells me something she learned that day. I always listen. I never pretend to already know. Last Sunday, she asked me if I was scared when I found the camera in the rabbit. I thought about it honestly. For a minute, I said, "Then I was angry." "What did you do when you were angry?" "I took pictures," I said, "and I called someone smarter than me." She thought about that. "Is that what you do when something bad happens? You document it?" "That's what you do," I said, "when you want to win." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her homework. Ruth caught my eye from across the kitchen and smiled. We stayed at the table until the soup was ready. The house smelled like butter and garlic and something I can only call home. We didn't go anywhere. We didn't have to. What they tried to take from us, we still had. All of it. I've thought a lot about what actually stopped them. Not the lawyer, not the recordings, not the courtroom. Those were the tools. What stopped them was a decision I made in about 30 seconds. Standing alone in my backyard holding a stuffed rabbit while a birthday party was still going on, 10 feet away from me. I could have put the rabbit back in Mia's arms. I could have told myself I was seeing things, that I was a 68-year-old man who'd been alone too long and was reading shadows into normal gifts. I almost did, as a version of that afternoon where I hand the rabbit back and say nothing. And 6 months later, Ruth and I are separated from everything we spent our lives building, and Mia is being asked by a social worker what she remembers about Grandpa's memory. That version didn't happen because I made a different choice. That's not luck. That's not fate. That's cause and effect, as direct as anything I ever taught in a classroom. What Diane and her mother and Victor Alcott built was a machine designed to run on silence. Every piece of it depended on no one looking too closely, no one documenting, no one asking the uncomfortable question out loud. They had done it before. They knew how to pick people who would doubt themselves, who would assume the best, who would let concern and politeness and family loyalty keep them quiet until it was too late to fight back. They weren't wrong that those tendencies exist. They were wrong that Ruth and I had them in the quantity they needed. I think about Raymond too. He knew for 8 months. He carried that knowledge like a stone in his chest and couldn't figure out what to do with it. And I understand that. Fear is not stupidity. Fear is what happens when the cost of speaking feels higher than the cost of silence. What changed for Raymond wasn't courage arriving from nowhere. It was hearing his daughter's voice on that recording, small and frightened and doing what she was told because a grown woman had convinced her that lying was love. He couldn't unhear that. And once you can't unhear something, the calculus changes. That's the thing about integrity. It's not a speech you give. It's a decision you make at the moment when the cost is real. Raymond made his. Late, yes. But he made it. What I want anyone to take from this is simple, and it is not comfortable. The people who try to take things from you, your home, your standing, your name, your dignity, they count on one thing above everything else. They count on you not trusting yourself. They surround you with small doubts. They ask soft questions. They plant little seeds of uncertainty, and then wait for you to water them with your own hesitation. The camera in that rabbit's eye was just the physical version of what they'd already been doing to my reputation for months. The answer to that is not anger. Anger is loud and loose and easy to dismiss. The answer is documentation, patience, precision. I was a teacher for 28 years. I know what evidence looks like, and I know that the person who controls the record controls the story. Mia asked me last Sunday what I did when I found the camera. I told her I took pictures. I called someone smarter than me. And I waited. She thought about that and said, "So you didn't freak out?" "I saved the freaking out for later," I said. "In private." She laughed. Ruth laughed from across the kitchen. That's the house they didn't take. That's the life they didn't get. Not because we were stronger than they were. Because we were more careful, more patient, and more willing to trust what we knew was true, even when they were working very hard to make us doubt it.